All right, let's kick this thing off. Good morning, everybody. Once again, we are here to talk about the hybrid cloud. It's called When Clouds Collide, Understanding the Hybrid Cloud, and we have most of the attendees present, so we're going to go ahead and begin. This is the latest free webinar from Fpweb.net, and we want to thank you again for taking the time to spend your coffee break with us, and we hope that you're able to walk away with a clear understanding of the hybrid cloud model, and also how to implement it into your business. Couple quick reminders again, our questions and answers will be at the end, so we ask that you send any questions or comments through the chat feature on this webinar. You can also tweet us at #FPWebinar, and we'll be live tweeting during the event, so feel free to follow us or retweet as you desire. The webinar is being recorded and will be available at the end. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenters, Mr. Stephen Rupp and Mr. Chris Schwab. Gentlemen.
Thanks, Peter. Hi, everybody. My name is Stephen Rupp. I'm one of the SharePoint architects over here at Fpweb.net. I've had the privilege to work with our prospects and our clients to talk about the different cloud solutions that we do from a SharePoint standpoint and get into specifics whenever it comes to RAM, VPUs, storage, and more. And also with us is our president, Chris Schwab.
Thanks, Stephen. Stephen mentioned I'm Chris Schwab. I'm the president here at Fpweb.net. My background is in IT. I've been doing IT technical work for 15, 16 years now. Started here and really have done a lot of pre-sales and marketing, and now kind of on the management side. And over the years, I've really seen a lot of different customers' cloud initiatives and kind of how they're going about it. And I know you have as well, Stephen. So hopefully here in the next, 15, 20 minutes, we'll be able to share some of that with the audience. But before we do that, why don't you kind of give them just a rundown here of what we're going to be talking about?
Sure. So guys and girls, what we have on today's list is, first and foremost, we're going to start out with defining the hybrid cloud and how we see that. Then we're going to talk about examples of hybrid cloud, why it's become so popular, and we'll discuss how you're probably already using the hybrid cloud. And lastly, how can you move into the hybrid cloud? But as Peter mentioned at the beginning, we're going to have a Q&A at the end of it. You can tweet out to us via #FPWebinar, and there's a window up in the top right-hand corner of the WebEx. But without further ado, let's kind of go ahead and dive into this. And, Chris, how do you see the hybrid cloud, or how would you define it?
Yeah, and that's really an important first step here, because anytime we throw around hybrid or cloud, right, they're pretty ambiguous terms. So it's pretty important we all kind of get on the same page so that what we're talking about kind of makes more sense. So, we've always had this concept of doing stuff on-premise. When the cloud first kind of got hatched, a lot of people would take everything and move it to one provider. But what we're talking about here with hybrid is sort of splitting that up. So all of your stuff isn't going to reside in the same location anymore. So you may have data sort of spread out to several different services because they specialize in different things, right? So and what we're finding is that one-size-fits-all solution that a lot of people are kind of going to in the early days of cloud just really kind of fell down a little bit when some of these specialized stuff, like maybe it's a compliance issue or something like that we'll talk about here in a little while, sort of got introduced. So there's a lot of popularity to this kind of mix and match, services for using the right tool for the right job. So, Stephen, what are you seeing as far as the popularity increasing with the whole hybrid system?
Sure, definitely over the past year, it's been growing a lot. And in one of our recent blogs, our marketing coordinator, Brianna Smith, did, she mentioned a study done by the 2013 Future Cloud Computing in partnership with GigOm Research. It found that 76% of 855 respondents expect hybrid cloud to be the core of their cloud strategies within the next 5 years. Now, this has overtaken the public and private cloud. This was also the largest survey they have done yet. And one of the other big popular ones that you guys probably know of is Gartner. And they predict that the size of cloud computing market could reach $150 billion in 2013. So as you can see, the clouds are forming, they're pointing this direction. And, there's multiple different ways that you can start out with the hybrid cloud as well. And, Chris, you've been doing this for a while, and I imagine you've had the opportunity to be involved in many different scenarios. What have you seen as the most popular in the hybrid cloud arena?
Well, there's a lot of different ways to kind of do it, and usually what people do is sort of pick off the easiest thing and go with that, right? So here at Fpweb, what we do a lot of times, is we try to identify systems that we don't really want to support ourselves, They're not something that's going to have a lot of customization in it. So we use something, we use Link, right, as a provider already, and we've got that integrated into our systems here. Stephen, I know you guys use a lot of Salesforce.
Yep.
We use a system called HubSpot. There's a lot of different stuff running around that are sort of these specialized tools that we're integrating with what we have kind of locally that we're supporting. Another good one that a lot of customers are looking at is they're looking at going to Exchange offsite. There's just not a lot of benefits for them supporting it themselves. So they're looking to a provider that specializes in Exchange, and they're just going to offload that so that their people have some more time. And this really isn't a concept that's limited within the walls of IT, right? There's a whole shared services community. There's lots of departments have been doing this for a while. The big one that everybody probably realizes is that the accounting departments have been outsourcing their payroll for a long time, except for in some of the larger organizations. But it's the same concept as far as let's get rid of some of this stuff so that we can have a little bit more time to focus on the business, which we'll talk about here in a little bit as well. So how do we get started though, Stephen? There's what's the first step? So we've already kind of maybe got an idea of what some of these systems are. Maybe we're already kind of doing some of them. But how do we move this conversation forward?
Sure. So, from what I've seen, a lot of people out there, first and foremost, you need to analyze the applications that you have, figure out which ones are, less prone to where you have to give the most attention to. As mentioned, a lot of people, they'll start with an Exchange, or maybe it's their CRM, they're using Salesforce, which, probably some of you on the call are using already. But it's, choosing that application that a lot of people can start out with that's going to be the easiest, they don't have to pay a ton of attention to, is typically, the best route. And, one of the questions, Chris, that a lot of people come to us and, is how do we get started with the hybrid cloud? And, I've heard, whether it's on phone calls, at conference calls, at conferences, you just suggest typically several steps that they should take before, a business jumps into the cloud. And, there's a couple different key things that they need to do internally. And, if you'd like to talk about those.
Yeah, there's a series of things that people are always bringing up when they're looking at this stuff, and whether they're barriers or really just things that they need to analyze themselves. The three big ones are data, and personnel, and then kind of a catch-all, which is business requirements. Data is always the big one, though, right? So people are always afraid to kind of let go of their stuff and put it in the hands of somebody that they may or may not know or they don't trust. And there's some pretty valid reasons to do some pretty heavy analysis on that data to figure out what compliancies are you under, what requirements do you have internally to be able to access that, how fast do you need it if you can't get to it, what's your recovery time like. So there's a lot of stuff that we need to go into for the data level requirements that. Again, we just want to make sure that we've quantified it, right? So all my data may not be subject to compliancy requirements, maybe just a subset of that. So, again, like for our sakes, maybe the stuff that's going over Link is pretty easy, right? So we can offload that and give our IT staff kind of more time to focus on what they're doing with that more sensitive data. Which sort of brings us into the personnel stage of this a little bit. So, Stephen, when you're on conversations with customers and they're talking about, moving to the cloud, what are you seeing as far as a personnel standpoint that they're trying to buffer or at least kind of maybe relieve and get some more time back on their staff?
Sure. So typically, whenever they approach those discussions, the first thing that I usually see them do is they're going to go through and look at the staff that they have and analyze the expertise that they have on hand. And then also, figure out where their weak points is, if they could be bringing in a hosting provider that specializes in that sort of that product. And, also, figure out how in-depth do you want your team to focus on those certain applications. And more than anything, what can you leave off to the experts? Because you want your IT team to focus on your core business. That's where they're going to be most beneficial. They know it more and better than anybody else. But one of the other big subjects as well is business requirements.
Yeah, so, it kind of really leads into the other two, right? So the data and the personnel standpoint. you know, like Stephen mentioned, we really want our personnel not necessarily focused on doing something that anybody else can do. We want them focused on really running the business. And the data, we may have some compliancy stuff, but there's also some business requirements that are floating around as far as, you know, maybe we need to get that data dispersed out, right? So maybe we've got a large organization. Maybe my only IT staff is here in America, but I've got some other workers that are over in Europe or Asia, and I need to get that data kind of closer to them. Does it make sense to, you know, actually have an IT footprint out there, or is that something where I can kind of use a hybrid cloud to maybe run those hosted while I run my headquarters, you know, on-prem? You know, that's one sort of one concept. You know, DR is another one. Back when I was doing IT several years ago, we were always looking into maybe co-locating in a facility to do some sort of a disaster recovery. And not only was it not something we were really good at architecting, I mean, we could figure it out, but it also really took a lot of time just to figure out how this all was going to work. And looking back, if we had gone with one of these maybe hybrid solutions as just a DR facility, you know, that would be one way to sort of free up some time. And then maybe even the flip side of that, maybe they even run our production, and all I have to do, you know, from an administrator standpoint is maintain my disaster recovery. So DR is now going to be on-prem, and everything else is going to be out in the cloud. You know, that again would free me up to now start taking a look and solving it at specific business issues. So the business requirements are kind of related to the other two, and it's maybe just sort of a catch-all. But that's really where you start looking at this and actually making it powerful. And so not only are we really talking about kind of these barriers or the stuff that we need to analyze, but we're also talking about there are some pretty real benefits to this as well. You know, so Stephen, what are we seeing as far as, like, what are the benefits to actually move into one of these hybrid solutions that maybe, you know, people are already looking at or they don't even know exist yet?
Sure. So, you know, some of the big benefits whenever you're moving into a hybrid cloud scenario, first and foremost, you know, you're going to alleviate some of that maintenance overhead that the IT team is focusing on, you know, doing patches, updates, and so forth. You know, there's a lot of software renewals that you have in regards to the hardware, whether it's antivirus or the application that you have. Any kind of troubleshooting or repairs, you know, that's something that we're throwing off to the hosting provider then. One of the things that I really like is the security aspect, because, you know, if you have a dedicated solution, you know, you're still kind of have like the on-premise type of deployment where this is dedicated to you. In addition, you know, with it being in an enterprise data center, there's going to be redundant firewalls, intrusion prevention systems, generators, and a lot more. So, you know, the biggest thing of all is, you know, freeing up the responsibilities and, you know, giving this to the experts per se, and, you know, finding one that's going to work for you and your IT team best.
Yeah, and you know, really take advantage of those economies of scale, right? So we've got a lot of customers being hosted in the same location, and they can have some, you know, some bigger firewall and some higher dollar equipment, some better failover than what you can really do yourself, right? Even if it's not a massive provider, even if it's a specialty kind of a setup, they're really going to be able to pool those resources and be able to offer more than what you can really do yourself, right?
Yes, yeah. And more so than anything, guys, kind of recapping, you know, the direction's coming from C-level. And, you know, one of the things I always suggest to the people that, you know, whether I'm talking on the phone or out at the conferences, you know, it's always best to do your homework and look at the hybrid cloud at least, because, you know, as you've seen from the surveys and all the other statistics out there, this is, you know, the direction that everything's going, and it's going to be good to have your own game plan, something that you're comfortable with at least. You know, so in conclusion, we've talked about a lot. What is the hybrid cloud? Examples of the hybrid cloud, supporting facts, in how we might already be doing the hybrid cloud. But without further ado, we'll be happy to jump into questions. As Peter had mentioned, we'll have hashtag Fpwebinar in the chat window up in the top right-hand corner of the WebEx.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. We told you to be quick and concise, and I do hope that you were able to glean some great information from it. It's interesting to note that, as important as it is to have this information, whether or not you're being told already. So, to rephrase that, you need to have this information for your business on the ready. Basically, a lot of us already have it on the plate, but for the rest of us, it's likely coming down the pipeline, so we got to be prepared. Let's go to some questions here. Let me see pull up what we have. Okay, first question. What would be the easiest way to start using the hybrid cloud model?
Sure. So, as we discussed at the beginning of the webinar, from what I've seen people do is, picking out those applications that, that we've been doing for a while, whether that's an exchange-free email. From a CRM perspective, Salesforce is a big one. Typically, anything, where you don't have to give the most attention, and it's just easy to throw up to the cloud and kind of let the experts handle it that way and alleviate the resource constraint on your team.
Yeah, so just look around for kind of the least common denominator, right? The easiest thing to pick off. Let's go with that. Let's give it a shot, and let's move on to the more difficult things there. And what we'll find is we'll probably be left over. There'll probably be some stuff left over that's going to be more difficult to move, and maybe that's the stuff we keep in house. So.
All right, excellent. Second question asks, how does the cost structure change when you take something from in-house and place it in the cloud?
That's kind of a complicated one. On the surface of it, what we're doing is we're kind of shifting from a CapEx to an OpEx kind of a model, right? So if we do this stuff in-house, we're going to have a large expenditure up front that then we're not really going to see a lot of costs from over time, and then we're going to get hit with another large cost when it comes time to upgrade. When we go with a hosting provider, we're kind of moving that into an operating expense. So it's going to be monthly or quarterly or something like that, to where it's kind of just this consistent expense that we can plan for, but it may or may not be cheaper than buying this and doing it ourselves. So. The other interesting thing is not all the services are going to model themselves like this. So Salesforce is a good example, right? So they're by user. So now my cost structure is going to be a little bit different, right? So an Office 365 is by user as well. We have an ROI white paper out there, Peter, that we could probably get tweeted out to the hashtag here, that goes through, it's SharePoint related, but it talks about sort of all these different models and how those cost structures change over time. That might be kind of helpful for people here. So we'll get that tweeted out after the webinar.
Absolutely. Okay, got another question here. What about authentication and single sign-on? So how do we avoid our users having to use multiple passwords for multiple accounts?
It really depends on the system itself. If it's a system that's built on Active Directory, it's fairly easy. Active Directory has, ADFS, Active Directory Federated Services, kind of built in. We can use that to federate to another Active Directory system, which is going to get us our single sign-on. Some systems, though, that's authentication only, so it doesn't do some other stuff that a lot of times a product like SharePoint might want to query that to do some lookups and some searches. Most providers will also offer you the option to do a VPN, and when we get that set up, now all we have to do is a trust, a one-way, two-way, whatever it is. And then beyond that, a lot of the other systems out there will have their own built-in federation. So maybe they're going to federate out to another authentication provider like Facebook or Google or something like that, to where we've already got kind of a pool of users, and that's going to handle our authentication, and we can add people in that way. So ask your provider. This is a question that they get a lot, depending on the system, and they'll probably have a solution for you already sitting out there. So.
Yeah. And typically, one of the things, if I could add is, also check with your IT team as well. See what they're most comfortable with, because whenever you talk to the solution provider, they're probably going to have that option that they're already comfortable with it too.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. We got time for one more, so let's go with this one. What measures can I take to ensure the security of my data?
Sure. So, that is a great question, and that should be on every conversation. What I would say in regards to, making sure that you take the proper steps, make sure that they have redundancy built into the environment, that they're running in a virtual world to where they can fail over between hosts, that there's redundant generators, firewalls, intrusion prevention systems. You could also look into data encryption, which is a big one to ensure security. But more so, talk to the hosting provider, see what kind of they have going from an infrastructure setup. Make sure that the cloud environment that you get is not going to be a shared one. That's going to improve your security as well.
Yeah, and we already talked about quantifying what we've got, right? So if we've done that analysis on our data and we figured out, specifically what we need, just ask the provider. So, you know, it's a lot like the authentication question. The providers are going to be used to answering this. This isn't something new to them. Just tell them what you need, right? They don't want to get in a position where they weren't told up front that you needed something, and now it's becoming an issue either. So know what you need up front and ask for it, whether it's a specific compliancy, you know, requirement, or anything just internal to your IT staff. They'll have an answer for you, and you know, the answer might be we can or can't do it, but they've answered that before. So just know what you need and ask for it, and then let them come back with what systems are in place to kind of fulfill those requirements.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for questions. Big thanks to Chris and Stephen for presenting today. Especially thanks to you guys for attending. I certainly hope, like I said, you were able to glean some useful info from the webinar, something that you can plug into your business. If you couldn't see the deck, I know Dom reached out to us. Anybody else that couldn't see the deck that wanted to, we're going to get this available online, but you can also just send us an email to make sure that you get a copy of this when it becomes available. Everyone else, when it becomes available, I encourage you, please share this with anyone else that you think it could help. There'll be a survey as you exit out of this. Please fill that out so we can know how to reach out to you guys with some great FB webinars in the future. And any other questions, again, you can always get us on Twitter. You can email us, whatever it takes. We'll get back to you. And we look forward to hearing from you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.